All right, so here we are going to be talking about how we get the data out of Brightspace. We're going to hit the down arrow key and hit download. And I'm going to go ahead and open it in Excel. And when that opens, we have the yellow banner at the top that we are going to need to click on to enable editing. Okay, so this is a workbook full of many, many worksheets. It has a lot of data in it, actually. And we're going to go specifically to the one named gig. So if you notice down here, there's a grayed out and a green little arrow. If you hover over it, you get this little pop-up, and you can right-click. And if you right-click, you're going to see an alphabetical list of all the worksheets that are in here. So scroll down to gig. We're going to go in here to gig and hit OK. It's going to pop us over to this worksheet called gig. Okay. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to try and look at this data. We're going to inspect this data set. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is a quick review of what we did on Tuesday. So we want to come in here and we want to understand what are these variables. So first of all, let me give you a little information. So gig is the data from a temporary hiring, a company that does temporary hires. Provides temporary. All right, so gives people commonly known their gig. All right, so we have the employee ID is the unique employee, the record identifier, so we don't really need to define that one. We don't need to worry about that one. So we have hourly wage, we have industry, and we have job. Okay. So this is just going to be a little quick define file here of what we're dealing with initially when we first look at this data. Okay. So we're going to talk about the type and then the scale of measurement. If there's any rules like rules or other, we may or may not need that. And then we want to talk about what the variables are sometimes not so clear, right? These are like no-brainers. But sometimes you get variable names that you're like, what does that mean? And you need a little help. So this is our little help. All right, I just want to kind of step through it. So real quick, let's get through this part really fast. What kind of variable is hourly wage? Is it numerical or categorical? Numerical. And what scale of measurement is it? Does it actually have a 0 that means something? Yes. Right, so this is what we call ratio scale. And as far as any rules, we could just say it's, we can say that it's currency, right? Or money. Money. And it's basically, I don't know what else to say other than it's the hourly wage the employee was hired at. All right. Industry. What kind of variable is industry? Categorical. And what kind of scale is this one? Do we have a ranking amongst these industry types? No. So what do we call that? What's this? Nominal. Okay, rules, I don't know. We can maybe in the end come back and fill in how many total different kinds of industries are in this data set. The definition is this is the industry into which employee was hired. It's not where they came from, it's where their gig is. Okay, and then the job, let's look over here at job. We got analyst, engineer, sales rep, other, accountant, bunch of stuff. What do you? Categorical. Categorical again. And what's the scale on this one again? Ordinal. It's not ordinal. This one's nominal too. And again, there's not much to put for rules or other. Definition, this is the job they were given. Okay. So So if you hover over here, if you select column J, we can go over here to format and scroll down to auto fit column width. I wanted to make sure you guys knew about that one. And now that's as wide as we need it to be. We're going to select the whole little thing here and let's put a little box around it. And I'm not going to take all the time we did before to make it all pretty. You can do that on your own. I already showed you how. We're going to get into actually looking at this data set and trying to see what it tells us. Okay, so let's take the scroll bar and come way down to see how far this goes. So you notice it's pretty big. It has a 605 rows in here. But I've already lost track of what the variable names are. So if you remember, we want to be able to see that. I showed you how to do that on Tuesday. See if you remember how to do it. I'm going to go ahead and make the variable names bold, and I'm going to put an underline on them just because. All right, now I want to somehow enable me to be able to see these variable names no matter how far down I scroll. Do you remember how to do that? We went to View and Freeze Panes. And here I'm going to freeze the top row. Okay, so now as I scroll down, I can see what is what. Okay, I'm also going to just add another, I'm going to click A and insert a column to the left just to give me something to kind of work with a little bit. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here. And I'm going to start putting in a little bit of information. So among the very first things we want to know is how much data we actually have. Now, I look at these employee IDs. They look like they're all sequential, and it looks like we have 604. So let's just make sure. Count of records. All right. And notice I already kind of over my count of records. I want to show you one other thing that, let's say I don't really want to make column A any wider because I just want to keep it kind of on the small side. I can go over here to Home and hit this little wrap text button, and it's going to make that row a little bit wider, higher, and enable me to just put stuff here. Okay. All right. So let's say I just want to confirm that it looks like there's 604 employees, but let's make sure. So I'm going to say I can count this. I can use count, and notice this says count, and it tells me what it does. Counts the number of cells in a range that contain numbers, or I can use count A, which counts the number of cells in a range that are not empty. So for this particular one, I'm going to go with count A. It depends on what you want to do. You can use either one. But let's just go with count A. To select it, I'm going to hit Tab, and I'm going to go ahead and select B605. Then I take my scroll bar, go all the way to the very top, and I come over here to B2, and I'm going to hit Shift and click at the same time. Notice that up here in the formula, it put it in the right order. It went from B2 to B605. It was smart enough to do that for me. And it comes down and it tells me that the count of records is 604. All right. So did anyone notice anything as we scrolled through this? Because that's always the first thing you want to do. You kind of want to slowly scroll through your data, kind of notice things. Okay. Well, for one thing I noticed is hourly wage is money, right? We already said that. So let's turn that into money. So I'm going to go up here to the dollar sign and turn that into money. That's a good place to start. Anything else? Anyone notice anything? Yeah.
There's some blanks for the industry like that. 532.
Yeah, I see that too. So let's find out how many blanks. How bad of a problem are we dealing with here? So I can take this formula that's going to count anything that's not blank, and I'm going to copy it. Right now it has what's called a relative reference. It's referring to columns B, it's the cells B2 to B605. And because that's relative, later I'll show you about absolute. You might already know about it, but I'm just going to copy this and it's going to automatically change the column for me. So there's a couple ways I can do it. I can do Control C or right click and hit copy, or I can just take this little green square at the bottom right and drag it, and it's going to copy for me. Okay. So sometimes that's just the faster way to do it. So notice that while we do have 604 employee IDs and every single one of them has a wage, we don't always know what industry they got hired into, and we don't always know what job they got hired into, right? So as a manager, if you were trying to look at this data to figure out what's going on with your company, you might be like, whoa, what's going on there? So let's figure out how much is missing. So certainly you could do math. You could say the number of missing is 604 minus 594, but I just want to show you another function. So missing, we know those are both the same. I could say equals count blank. So count blank is another way to count the blanks. And I'm going to, again, come up to here, click on the bottom of that, come up to the very top, shift click, and then close the parentheses. And I see that I find that it is 10. All right, so there were 10 missing. And I can copy this over. I'm going to do it the other way. In Excel, by the way, there's at least 2, usually 3 or more ways to do everything. So you're going to find your way of doing it. Copy, and I can go here to paste. I like Control C, Control V. Okay, so we have 10 industry records that are blank, and we have 16 jobs that are blank. Okay. And maybe we want to count, so we've done some kind of counts here. What about if we wanted to count, what about if I was the client, you're doing the analysis for me, and I say to you, how many of my, in this data set, how many of these employees were hired at more than $40 an hour? So how can we get the count of how many were hired at more than $40 an hour? So let's put that in here. Count hired greater than $40 per hour. So this whole thing, probably I'm gonna call these wrap text. Okay. So first of all, which of the columns kind of would be the one we want to go to figure this out? Hourly wage, yeah. Because that's the one that's going to tell us that information. And really what we want is a count if the wage is greater than 40. Does anyone know the Excel function that we could use to tell us that? That gives us a count based on a condition? That, yes.
Count it.
Count if. But there's another one that's even better than count if. It's count ifs. And I'll tell you why. If you notice, I hit count, it's down here, count if and count ifs. So count if came first, and it has a stupid backwards logic to it. And then when they did count ifs, they actually flipped the logic. So if you don't want to have to learn 2 of them, just go with count ifs. It's the one that you would use if you have more than one condition. And that way, the logic isn't flipping every time you use one or the other, okay? So let's go with count ifs. I'm clicking down here and then I hit tab to select it. Now notice it's giving me a reminder of what to do. It says criteria range 1, criteria 1, comma, ... And that's because I could put more than one condition. So when I am using a function, I can also use this little F with a little X button right here, up here in the formula bar. And that will open up for me a GUI interface that can guide me to how to use that function. So I pop that, I hit that, and I got this little interface. And it's saying, well, what's your criteria range 1? So my criteria for this count is going to be that column of data of hourly wage. So I'm going to click on the first one. And again, I'm going to grab my scroll bar over here. I'm going to scroll to the very top. I can move my box out of the way if I can't see my scroll bar. Come up to the very top and hit shift click. All right. Now I can hit tab to go to criteria or just click on it. So my criteria 1 is going to be that it's greater than 40. And I can hit enter. Now notice what happened. Anyone see a problem with the answer? Right. We wanted a count and it gave us an out. It formatted as money, but we don't want that. So let's just format that cell by itself. It's already selected. We can go up here, and instead of accounting, I'm going to hit this drop down, and I can go to number. And now I look at it, it says 373.00. Well, that's kind of weird because when you're counting something, usually you don't have decimals, right? So it's more weird. So there's a couple ways to fix that. I can use this button right here to get rid of the decimals. Or I can use this little drop, sorry, I can see where it says number. There's a little tiny box right here. It's a pop out for formatting the number. Go there, and here it says decimal places. So in here I could put 0. And it's gonna let me see. Notice that I have options. I could make negative numbers red instead of having a negative in front of them, or I could put parentheses around them, okay? So you have some options. Some of these are used in accounting more, but I'm going to go with the first one. All right, so now we see, okay, there's 373 of these employees got hired at more than $40 an hour. What about, how many of these worked as engineers, right? How many made more than $40 an hour and were engineers? So we can do a compound thing. So count hired at greater than 40 as engineers. All right, so here we can just do this count ifs, because we're going to introduce 2 conditions, right? So equals count ifs. Tab, I'm going to go ahead and work with the pop out, just so you guys can see that how to do 2 ranges here. So the first range is the first one that we just did. We're sort of repeating what we just did. We're just going to put that in there, tab, and say that's greater than 40. And now I'm going to tab, and I have criteria range 2. So criteria range 2 is going to be this job field. So whoops, I better grab my scroll bar. It's got 600 records. So come down here, tab, and we're going to say engineer. I don't think I need an equals. I think it assumes it. Let me see. Yep. So $150. Again, I don't want that. So now notice, I could go through what I just did to fix the formatting, or I could come back up to the one that looks right, and I can go over here to this format painter, click the format painter. Notice it's got this moving dash blocks around it. So that's the one it's gotten the format from, and I can just click here and it'll paint that format over there. Okay, that saves you a lot of time if you want things to be homogeneous. All right. All right. So besides that, let's talk about sorting this data. So to sort this data, I'm going to show you one way to sort it, which is to create a table from it. So we're going to go up here to B1 and select the top left corner of our data, including the title of the variable, and the bottom right. So I'm going to hit shift click so I get that whole rectangle of data. And up here on the home tab, I'm going to come over to format as table. So can someone suggest a color for this table, or a light, medium, or dark, and what color? Go ahead, someone.
Dark orange.
Dark orange. Can we go with this one right here?
Yep. All
right, let's do that. Now notice, it's going to say, where is this data for your table? I already selected it, so it already populated that for me. Then I clicked on my table has headers. I can say okay. And now we have this table that came up with dark orange, and we also got a new tab up here. It's a design tab. Now this design tab, I can come over here and click this, and I can get that original selection. Like, let's say, man, that was a bad choice. I don't like that. I want this one, okay? Just kidding. You know, or someone says, you know what, I like blue better. I'm gonna go with this light blue over here. All right, so you guys can play around with all the different things to make it look how you like, okay? But basically, created a table. Now, there's a couple things about this table. I have now that I'm in the table, once you click on the table, you'll see this design tab for the table. over here, I can rename this table. Right now it's called table 1. I can call it just gig data. I can't use any spaces though. So let's just say I call it gig data, whatever. Sometimes it's useful for other things. But I get these little drop-down arrows next to every one of these variables. Those drop-down variables are going to be very, very helpful for sorting. So I can sort, for example, hourly wage. It gives me the choice, smallest to largest or largest to smallest. So let's say I go largest to smallest. So I see that the highest hourly wage in this data set is 51. And I can scroll down and see that the lowest one is 24.28. That's a great way to make sure you don't have some random weird number in your data set that doesn't make any sense. All right, because sometimes data is an outlier and it's supposed to be in there because it makes, and other times it doesn't. So the example would be like, let's say someone puts in that they're 8 feet 6 inches. So maybe there's somebody that's 8 feet 6 inches in your data set, but maybe that was a typo. And those are the kind of things you have to sometimes investigate. So now let's say we want to sort on industry. So you could sort on industry, again, you go alphabetical. But the other really nice thing about these little drop-down buttons is they show you what's in your data. What are the unique values in your data? So notice this one has automotive, construction, tech, and blanks. So without having to do a whole lot more work, we already immediately know that we're only talking about 3 industries in this data set. Okay. And let's say we want to get rid of those blanks. We could just get rid of the blanks. Or let's say if you unclick the select all, you can maybe look at just construction jobs. All right. Now notice that when you click, like let's say now, let me go back and select all. So I got automotive and I scroll down and then I got construction and then I'll have tech and then I have the blanks. If I come over here to job and I do the same thing on job, notice as I scroll down that I now have automotive down here. So it did not maintain the sort order from industry. It just sorted just on job. So if it didn't do that kind of sorting on 2 columns. It's not like, oh, I sorted first on industry, now I'm going to sort on job. It didn't do that. It was a whole new sort as if it didn't care what you did before, okay? If you really want to sort on both, you need to come up here to data and we're going to sort. And notice that it popped this open. It already grayed this out because it already knows there's a table that has headers. And let's say we want to sort first on industry, we'd use this drop down. Let's say we want to go on A to Z on industry. And within each industry, we want to sort maybe by wage. So up here, we would go to add a level. And maybe here we'd go hourly wage. And it's going to be smallest to largest as a default. I can use this drop down to go largest to smallest. And so now all of a sudden, I've sorted this data by industry. And within each industry, I've sorted it into hourly wage. So that gives me a lot more information. Now, the next thing I might want to do is actually kind of know, like I still have to scroll through 600 rows of data to kind of make sense of this. It'd be kind of nice to actually have it sort of summarized for me. And Excel will do that. If you go over here to insert, we can insert what's called a pivot chart and a pivot table. So right below pivot chart, there's a little drop down arrow. I'm going to select pivot chart and pivot table. And if I select that, it has already identified the table. I could, if I had more than one table in my workbook, I can just put the table name here. And I'm going to have it go to a new worksheet. A lot of times that helps. So let's hit OK there. Notice that we got a new worksheet. It's called sheet 1. And we get like a blank slate that we can work with. I'm going to slide this over just a little bit so we can kind of focus on it a little bit. And what we have here are the places that we can move some of these variables into. So let's say I want to move industry into the axis category. It immediately put the row label names with the industries here. I can take job, let's say, and put it under legend. And notice now in my table is behind my chart. So I want to click on the chart and I'm going to slide it down here just so they're not overlapping. But it's blank. And that's because it doesn't know what I want to create as my values that I'm going to be including in this chart or in this table. So I'm going to pick hourly wage and I'll pull that down here. So I just drag and drop the hourly wage in there. Okay, but notice that if you look at this, it's kind of messed up in a couple of ways. For one thing, these numbers aren't looking like money. So the first thing I can do is highlight all these, go back to home and hit the dollar sign. Now, several of them, if you notice, are giving me these hash marks. Does anyone know what the hash marks mean? The hash marks means that the column isn't wide enough. So this is where I can do that nice little formatting step where I go to format and auto fit column width. Okay. Now, notice that it also doesn't make sense because what are we looking at? We're looking at the sum of hourly wages by each of these categories. Do you think it makes sense to look at the sum of hourly wages? There's nothing wrong in what we did, except it's useless. It doesn't help us at all. What would make more sense?
To look at what jobs are hiring the most.
Well, I'm talking about building this table. That's not a bad idea, but we'll put that on the back burner. Yeah.
Average.
The average, right? The average or the max or the min or something like that. So if we want to go and we want to change these to average, see right here it says sum of hourly wages. There's a drop down arrow right next to it. I just want to pause a second, make sure everyone catches up to me to that spot. And then over here, there's value field settings. Okay. So click on that and you get this pop-up and it's going to default to the sum, but you can choose different things in this drop down. I'm going to choose average here. Okay. So now we see that we can determine that an accountant makes on average $40.58. Anyone working in the automotive field makes an average of $43.41. Or you can look at the intersection of these categories. For example, you can say, what does an engineer in the tech field makes $38.66 on average? Okay, so now we're starting to see a little bit more, get a little more information out of this data, right? It's not just random data anymore. It's starting to come together. Now, if we look down here, we're looking at our average hourly wages and we have all these bars, but you notice they look kind of, it's hard to tell the difference between them, right? Because they're all up there around 35 to 50 somewhere, or 45, they're right up in there. So if it was me and I was trying to make sense out of this data or give a story with this data, we could come over here to the axis and I'm gonna right click on that and go to format axes. And that's gonna open up this other option. I'm gonna close the pivot chart here. Let me make this bigger again. See, it says bounds, minimum, and max. I'm gonna look at this bar chart and I'm gonna say, well, I'm looking like, if I look at 30, I feel like I'm gonna be able to zoom in a little bit better. Hold on, I don't got my num lock on. There we go. And notice that now automatically I've gotten a much more interesting bar chart, right? So this bar chart now actually has some information that maybe I can pull something out of because I can see it. Does anyone see something that pops out of them? Remember, you want to bring value to your client. You want to give them information, maybe above and beyond their question. They may have come to you with a question like, you know, which industry is paying the highest hourly wage? And you could go, oh, okay, well, in that case, I just tell you it's automotive. You know, that's like a quickie. But maybe you can tell them something else that would add value. Or you can see something else. Does anyone see anything in this bar chart? Does something pop out at you? Something that would be a data story. that you see? Anyone? How about if you want to be paid the most per hour, it's looking like you'd want to be doing what? Yeah. You'd want to work in automotive, in particular, this job called other. We don't know what other is. So you could say to the client, I don't know what other is, but you might want to look into that, right? Because it's paying the most. You might want to understand that a little better. Anything else? Does anything pop out for anyone else? Do they see something? How about like, why are only construction industry hiring analysts, right? There's no analysts in the other ones. Maybe we would want to market analysts to some of these other industries. Anything else? Oh, and also let's get rid of the blanks. We can get rid of the blanks right here. These is a little drop down, get rid of the blanks there. Okay, that's a little better. Do you see a ranking of hourly wage for engineering? Do you see that in the data? Anything else? I see automotive pays the most for engineers, then construction, and then tech. Yeah.
Programmers get paid around the same, no matter like which industry you go into.
Very good, very good. So programmers are not changing as much from industry to industry. Okay. Well, hopefully that gives you a little bit of a flavor of what we're talking about when we